all cancer needs more funding. But what I would say is that there's clearly a handful of cancers that are receiving funding that is far less than you would expect relative to the number of people that are affected by those cancers.
So what do you think needs to be done to solve it?
I think the National Cancer Institute would serve us well by coming out with a lucid statement that says, okay, how do we actually allocate funding by cancers? What is the logic behind that? Second solution, I would argue, comes into play in media. If you want to be a health journalist, you're going to see way more leukemia stories, way more breast cancer stories. The press releases are going to be running into you. There's going to be a lot more research coming in for that. And unless you know that, for example, there are cancers that are rarely depicted but are very common, how do you actively start to interject your own frame on it? The third thing is the role I think the public might have. A lot of cancer funding also comes from local or regional organizations. Let's make sure that our local efforts don't mirror these same distortions. If you were to raise something like $20,000 for bladder cancer, it would have a significant effect on the research in a way that it might not in breast cancer, because bladder cancer is struggling to even get off the ground from a research area, right? So $20,000 might take a young faculty member who's just starting their research line somewhere. Well, now that person has a 40-year career studying bladder cancer because of that initial seed grant.
What about the coverage of treatment? Has there been any media effect there?
Oh yeah, definitely. The bulk of news coverage of cancer is about innovative cancer treatments. And there are lots of distortions. And the reason it's a problem we have to get away from is that early clinical research is often a failure. There's a survey called the Health Information National Trend Survey. It's put out by the National Cancer Institute. And what it finds every single year is that 3 out of 4 Americans are frustrated and confused. Oh, they got a thing that's going to cure cancer, but then you never hear about it again. And I think that's a byproduct of covering research too quickly. And it's unfortunate because there is a lot of cancer research that is very far along. One of the things I can't believe we're not talking more about in the press right now is where we're at with colon cancer screening. That's research that is ready for public consumption. And yet, you know, there's more stories in any given year about nani juice and how it might prevent cancer.
And you've referred to something that researchers call cancer fatalism.
Cancer fatalism is the belief there's nothing you can do. It has 2 components. You can be fatalistic about prevention. I'm going to get it or I'm not. Everything causes cancer, so it's just pick your carcinogen, right? And then there's cancer fatalism about treatment, that if you get cancer, you're either going to live or die. What you do after you're diagnosed is irrelevant. As you might guess, fatalism about prevention is very, very common. Fatalism about treatment, less so. There's something a little self-serving about that, I think, if you unpack that, right? If I get cancer, I want to believe there's something I can do to stop it. But I don't want to believe that what I'm doing right now is causing cancer. You know, how do you start talking about cancer prevention with a public that just thinks everything you're telling them is going to be contradicted tomorrow? They told us that margarine was bad, then they told us it was good. You know, which one's better, margarine or butter?
It's butter.
Well, here's what the epidemiological research really says. There's not many studies, and they find very small differences, and the difference keeps flipping back and forth. And the first couple of times it flips, it's a story, but now it's almost become a tragedy because it's an exemplar of what they perceive all cancer news coverage to be. I'll give you an example. I'm working with the Huntsman Cancer Institute at the University of Utah to start developing a message about low-dose aspirin and how it prevents colorectal cancer. There is a lot of data supporting it. So we're trying to develop a message for the public. But when we start running surveys with people, the first thing I get back is, oh, I'm just tired of hearing this.
Margarine.
Yeah, margarine or butter, man. Tomorrow you're going to tell me low-dose aspirin causes colorectal cancer. We have played certain cards too much. We have allowed cutting-edge research to be the topic of too much conversation, and then it flip-flops or it fails. And unfortunately, when we come forward with really strong research, they're going to be understandably skeptical because we have failed them before.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Jacob Jansen specializes in cancer communication at the University of Utah. So Jansen says the messaging filtered through the media often fails us. That's because those messages are bound up in science scientific and political complexities. But some news stories are deceptively, beguilingly simple. A child with cancer needs money. You can save him. This next story comes from Amanda Aronchik, a reporter for WNYC's new health podcast, Only Human.
All cancer stories start at diagnosis. For 8-year-old David Grover, it came in 2003. His jaw hurt. His father, Brian Grover, assumed it would be a short visit to the hospital in Fairfax.
Yeah, I mean, we went in to get him hydrated and didn't come out for a year and a half, and we were still in and out of the hospital for the better part of 2.5 years, roughly.
Once David was admitted, Brian shuttled between the hospital, his job at a computer company, and raising his 3 older boys. His wife, Tiffany, essentially moved into David's room. Her company reduced her pay, reduced her hours, let her go.
She only missed one night, I think. Was it 2? 2 nights. They kicked her out of the hospital because she was really sick, and I came in, and she said, no, call me and wake me up in 4 hours, and I refused to do it, and she slept for about 19.
Their son had a grapefruit-sized tumor filling the cavities of his skull, pressing on his throat and obstructing his breathing. Tiffany said the standard treatments, like chemo, were disastrous.
Where most people nausea vomiting, for David nausea vomiting and would shut down an organ. Something totally unexpected. And that was one of the reasons they didn't. His prognosis was so bleak.
The family was advised to procure a do not resuscitate order. Doctors said,
find yourself a gravesite.
Sometimes the doctors were assholes.
It's hard to fathom a worse nightmare. But Brian and Tiffany believe in God, family, and a good laugh, probably in that order, and they refuse to wallow. And David is their kid. When he decided that the hospital toys were lame, he didn't feel sorry for himself. He used his wish from Make-A-Wish to buy games for the other inpatient kids.
At this time, you have this little boy who had given away his Make-A-Wish, which, first of all, to me, that's outstanding. I mean, a kid can have whatever they want for their Make-A-Wish, and he didn't want it.
The local paper picked up that story. Then one quirky, heartwarming story begat another. The Washington Post found out the family was raising money for an experimental treatment in Los Angeles by selling shoes, purses, old jeans on eBay. Anything they could fix a price to, they were selling. Then Tiffany auctioned a bumper sticker.
Brian had made bumper stickers, made 5 of them, that said Frank must die.
David named his tumor Frankenstein, Frank for short. Frank must die. eBay wasn't new, but these were what you might call the experimental years. People were selling all sorts of weird things. Their souls, their towns, their virginity, and famously a half-eaten, decade-old grilled cheese sandwich with the image of the Virgin Mary burnt into the toast, which sold for a ridiculous sum of money.
20-some-odd thousand, maybe more? Crazy money. And I'm like, you know what? If somebody's going to buy grilled cheese, maybe they'll buy a bumper sticker and we'll get a couple $100.
Tiffany posted her Frank Must Die bumper sticker for 99 cents. She labeled the auction, "Help Kill My Son's Cancer." But that's not what she was selling. So eBay took down the auction. Outrage ensued. Outrage equals more media.
From NBC News, this is Today.
At this point, David Grover had endured 2 years of chemo and radiation. He could take no more of either. The family faced a choice. Get a craniotomy to peel back David's face to remove the now peach pit-sized tumor, or take their son home and, quote, enjoy the rest of his time. Tiffany found a doctor in LA who thought he could remove the tumor through the nose. Now, at this point, David Grover was a leading news item. A Today Show producer told the doctor about David and eBay. He offered to do the surgery for free. They flew to LA and were greeted by a swarm of reporters.
I mean, we're in LA at Cedars-Sinai Hospital. Everybody that's, an actor goes here. I'm sure it's somebody like Tom Hanks is here. No, it was all for David, which was crazy.
Post-surgery, the Today Show even got exclusive rights to this declaration.
Doctor, walk us through what the prognosis was. You have some good news to share with us.
We do indeed. We can tell today that Frank has left the building.
David Grover was tumor-free, and his family, flown back to Los Angeles for more media appearances, were bi-coastal cancer celebrities.
Here she is now, Ellen DeGeneres.
Sitting on a couch beside Ellen DeGeneres, David looked small. His glasses sit on his ears that stick out a bit, and